Over 70 years ago, a country put a pause on a war that divided it into two separate parts. This area between the two countries is completely at peace. They're not allowed to continue fighting and they're not allowed to have any military equipment. And yet, there's still a lot of tension because the war has not finished. And there's still tension about whether this war will start again and what could happen after. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to English on Autopilot. And today we are going to talk about one of the most interesting, if not the most interesting, part of my trip to South Korea. I went to South Korea about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, to visit my brother. My brother and my sister in law live in Korea. My sister in law is from Korea and he invited me to spend Christmas and New Year's with them. It was an amazing trip. It was one of the best trips I've ever taken in my life, and I loved South Korea. It's an amazing country, extremely beautiful. The food is incredible, and I would absolutely go back. There were many amazing things we did. We went to a lot of interesting places with a lot of history. And yet there was one place that really impacted me. There was one place that I'll never forget going to, and that's the border between South and North Korea. Now, South and North Korea were once one country. They were a unified country, and then a war broke out between the northern part and the southern part of the country. The northern part of the country was backed by China and Russia as well, wanting to implement a communist government. The south was later backed by the United States and the United Nations, which wanted a democratic government. Now, there was no winner to this war because technically this war is still going on. However, in 1953, they agreed to pause the war, an amnesty deal between North Korea and China, as well as the southern part of the country with the United States and the United Nations. The United States is a part of the United Nations, of course. And they agreed to create a border at the 11th degree north parallel line. It's not exactly because it trends upwards, but that's where it's said to be. Now, this area is known as a demilitarized zone, also known as a DMZ. The DMZ is the demilitarized zone where they are not allowed to have military activity, and it separates the two countries. Now, it is extremely big. You might think it's a small border, a small line, but it's not. This demilitarized zone stretches all the way across the peninsula, across the Korean peninsula, which is 250 kilometers long, or as we would describe it in the United States, 160 miles long. It's extremely long, but it's also quite wide. It's 4 kilometers wide or 2.5 miles wide. It's really a big area. It's really a big zone between the two countries. And you are able to visit it. I want to talk a little bit about when my brother and I went to visit the DMZ. So we stayed the night in Seoul, the capital of South Korea, with my sister in law and her family. We went over there and we spent the night at the mother of my sister in law. We spent the night at their apartment. Early in the morning, my brother and I got up, we had breakfast, and we headed out. To get to the DMZ, it's not that difficult because Seoul is in the northern part of South Korea, not too far from the DMZ. We actually went there by taking the metro all the way to the last stop up north. When you get there, they have a big mall, a big area for people to do some shopping for because when they do tours, you normally have to wait because you have to reserve a certain time. And so my brother and I had time before our tour. And so we went around the mall, we had lunch, we had a coffee, and seeing the area around it was really interesting. When I was in Korea, it was the end of December, early January, so it was quite cold. There was snow, and it was a really beautiful landscape. But you notice how empty it is. You notice how empty it is, which is a big contrast to Seoul, which is a giant, bustling metropolis, a huge city with a ton of people. And then you go up north, and all of a sudden, it's extremely quiet. They have different installations as well, talking about the history of the Korean War and the history of the DMZ. We also went through some of those to learn a little bit more. My brother has lived in Korea for years and he is well versed on this topic, on the Korean War and all these things. So it was great to go with him because he was able to explain in even more detail some of these different events that occurred and was able to give me kind of an insider's look into the Korean War, as well as the fact that my sister-in-law is Korean. So he was a great tour guide for this. And then we finally got on the bus that took us all the way to the DMZ. Now, it's not just anyone can go, of course. You need to fill out paperwork, you need to have your passport, which I didn't have on me. Luckily, I had a scan of the passport, and when the bus stopped before we got to the DMZ, there's a checkpoint where the military police check everyone's documentation. They make sure everyone that should be on the bus is on the bus before they let you pass through. And so it's very interesting when you're on the bus, you see a lot of military police, you see a lot of security and control around the area. Of course, it makes sense because this war is just on a break, and both countries are, of course, on high alert. So he checks all the documentation. There was a little bit of a problem because I didn't have my physical passport. We had to talk to the military police, explain I didn't have my passport. I had to show them a scan on my phone, and finally they let us pass through. Then, as we're going, we're looking around, and again, it is empty. The landscape is absolutely empty. We get to the DMZ, and there is a big building with multiple floors, and they tell you you have a certain amount of time. And we go up to the top floor, which has a giant, giant terrace up there. There's a huge balcony where you can see out across the DMZ. There's also telescopes where you can look through and see the village that North Korea built when the Korean War was put on a pause. South Korea also has a village, but North Korea put theirs in plain view of the DMZ to try to attract people from the south to come up north. Of course, it looks very nice. Now, it was built in the 50s, so it's in that style, right? It's in an older style than today in the 2020s. But but it looks very nice. However, when you look through the telescope, you notice some weird things. Completely empty. No one lives there. A lot of the rooms have no furniture, and there's not even windows in all. There's not even glass window panes in all the window frames. So it's just an empty hole. There's a giant flag. There's a giant flag. It's huge and a very, very tall flagpole with the North Korean flag. And you realize you're looking into North Korea. Now, as an American, for me, it was very, very impressive. It was very shocking because I've grown up hearing about North Korea, the secrets around it, the dictatorship that runs it, and there's not much information that comes out of North Korea because it needs to go through the dictatorship there. It's very difficult to know anything about it, and it's even more difficult to see pictures and videos. Of course, with the internet, you can see some, however, you don't get to see a lot. And so for me, actually seeing North Korea was, mm, like I said, really impactful. It was a shock. Then from there, we went to visit one of the tunnels. Now, North Korea dug four separate tunnels that go under the DMZ, presumably to launch another attack against South Korea because it was the North Koreans that started the Korean War. And so it looked like they wanted to start it again. There are four tunnels in total, and one of the tunnels you can visit. And so, after watching a video explaining the tunnels, we went into the tunnel. The first thing you notice, because you have to put on a helmet, the first thing you notice is how small it is. The entire time you're walking crouched over, bent over. I'm not very tall. My brother's taller than I am. But even I had to walk crouched over, and that's why you wear a helmet because I hit my head on the ceiling one or two times. It's also very steep going down into the tunnel. And of course, it's very hot. Now, outside it's freezing cold, but you get into the tunnel and you feel the heat, and it is extremely deep. It was very shocking. It was very shocking to see these tunnels, to go inside them, to see the tunnels that were built by North Koreans to launch another attack on South Korea. After we got out of the tunnels, thankfully, and got some fresh air, we went to Freedom Village, which is the village that South Korea built, because as I mentioned, North Korea built one and South Korea did as well. Now, there's a big difference between them. The one in South Korea doesn't have giant buildings. It's not trying to show you how amazing South Korea is. It's showing the freedom. It's showing the ability for people to move around because people actually live there. And because of the location, one, it's right next to the demilitarized zone. It's right next to North Korea. And we can imagine that if there was another attack, that those people would be in great danger. So they give some benefits. The South Korean government gives some benefits to the people that live there, such as tax exemptions, having to pay less or even no taxes. Also, they do not have to serve in the military. Both in South and North Korea, military service is mandatory. Is mandatory. And for men, right? For men in South Korea. I'm not sure in North Korea because again, we don't have a lot of information about them. But in South Korea, all men have to serve in the military for a period of time. I believe for 2 years. Now, if you live there, you don't have to. And my brother explained as well that if you live there, your child will be accepted into Seoul University, which for South Korea is the best university in the entire country. It is an amazing university with an extremely high level of academics, which will, of course, help you get a job. If you graduate from Seoul University, you are a very employable person. Going around the village, you get to see the people there, the people that actually live there. We stopped in a store and it was quite nice. Of course, it's a small place, but it was very nice. It was very nice, and the people there were extremely friendly because you also have to imagine they deal with tourists every day because people want to go visit the DMZ. On the way back, my brother and I were talking about how beautiful the DMZ is. Beautiful in the sense of the nature, because no humans pass through it. And because of that, the nature is completely wild and full grown. And my brother explained that in summer, it is extremely, extremely beautiful. Now, my brother is a part of the US military. He's in the Army, and of course, they have done different exercises, military training around the DMZ. So he has spent a lot of time around the DMZ. And he told me in summer it's even more beautiful, the nature there. However, there have been incidents around and in the DMZ where people from South Korea and different soldiers that are there, that are stationed there, have been killed, as well as North Korean soldiers have been killed. These incidents, they try to diminish, they try to make sure that they don't happen, but with the tension that's there and the war still fresh, it happens sometimes. A mistake is made, and sometimes people start shooting at each other and people lose their lives. Now, other than that, they've changed as well around the DMZ. Both sides used to send propaganda to the other side, right? Trying to get people to disagree with their government, trying to stir up things. However, now they try to minimize that as much as possible, and there's been some unification efforts. However, it has not come to fruition. There are still two countries. And you feel that only when you go to the DMZ. When I was in South Korea, I didn't really think of North Korea at all. But I think it's important for people to understand the history when they travel there and understand what happened and why there's two countries and why they're still separated. South Korea is an amazing, amazing place, and I highly recommend all of you to visit. Put in the comments below if you've ever been to South Korea or if you plan on visiting it. If you do, I think you will have a great time. All right, everyone. I hope you have a great day, great week, great weekend whenever you're watching this video, and we'll see each other in the next one. Bye.